There is no question but that LSD, and he did take quite a lot of it, I believe. I wasn't living with him at the time.
But I just wonder whether you, David Gilmour and others were on the same path at the time.
It was right at the beginning of us getting our first record in any chart, and we were beginning to do TV shows in England. He went very odd.
When the whole thing went down with Syd, it was a crazy time, and the band was just coming up, so you still had to do press and TV shows, and you had to go on. The band had to sing, and you'd have to like lip sync Syd's lyrics and him singing.
Syd, did you write this?
Yeah.
I noticed on the album you wrote most of the songs. Is that true?
Yeah, that's right.
We did the Pat Boone show in '68.
I love that the Pat Boone show had Pink Floyd on. This is like the greatest thing.
And what Syd would do is, through every run-through or rehearsal, we were miming to see him play or something, I think, like that. And through the run-throughs, he'd be miming away. And then they go, okay, we'll take it, because we were taping it. And then when they went, action, he'd stand there like that. And they'd go, ready, and now. And he'd go, stop, they'd go. And they'd explain, and of course he was just having fun.
He's just playing, yeah.
Cut. Okay, we're doing it now, guys, ready? And Syd would go, yeah. And he'd do it again, until finally we had to say, listen, he's a bit weird, I'll mime it. And I think those tapes exist still, And he started, I remember him at Top of the Pops in the dressing room one day, looking worried and a bit frightened, and then going, John Lennon doesn't have to do this. Which was kind of wacky. And so he had misgivings about being on a miming pop show, Syd, this is what we've worked towards for the last 4 or 5 years, is to be on Top of the Pops and make a few quid, Buck up, boy, let's get on with it. Yeah, he was going a bit strange by then. John Lennon doesn't have to do Top of the Pops, he would say. Syd, are you crazy? This is what we've been working for, man. Come on, let's go for it. I shouldn't laugh because it was very sad what happened, but he was just not making very much connection with anything that you and I would consider to be real. And but he never did buck up from sort of that moment on, really. He wrote a few more songs, but nothing of any real note. And he just got more and more detached until he was completely wacky and not making any sense. I made a lot of attempts to find out what was wrong and to involve his family. He had elder brothers who I would ring up and say, hey, there's something really wrong with Roger, as they called him, because his name was Roger Barrett, not Syd Barrett.
Oh.
And I alerted his family as well, and his elder brother Alan, I think, was a doctor, and he actually came up to London and seen him, and went back and said, no, he's fine, I've seen him, there's nothing wrong with him. Well, we all knew there was something seriously amiss, He's fine, he's had some troubling times, but he's actually fine. And I went, Alan, he's not, but trust me, I live with him, And we tried to get him to a shrink, on a number of occasions, but he would never go in. Probably not a great choice, as it turned out in the end, but we never actually managed to get him through the front door. We, got him to the door a couple of times, but never got him through the door. And then it just got weirder and weirder.
Like, in what way weird? Like, what was...
Incommunicative, not making any sense at all. We'd been to a meeting at the Capitol Tower in Los Angeles, and Syd and I were walking down the street after it. And we stopped at the traffic light at Hollywood Boulevard and Vine Street in Los Angeles. And he looked at me and smiled, and he said, it's nice here in Las Vegas, isn't it? Well, we were in LA. So he already had no idea where he was, even like that. Was no longer able to function in a rock and roll band because he wasn't making enough contact with the reality of the situation. Then his face darkened, and he looked down at the ground and spat out one word: people. And that sort of encapsulates what it was like. Nothing made any sense.
Disjointed.
Blank, disjointed. And we actually, as I'm sure you must know, we did a tour in '68 of the States. I mean, just of the West Coast. I think we only did 3 gigs or something. You know, where it was quite clear that he'd gone. He was, you know, he was no longer with us in any real sense. You know, in the movie where the cigarette burns down between the fingers, well, I went into the room and saw that. He'd been sitting in a room in the hotel in LA with this, you know, bits of burnt cigarette paper on his fingers like that, and the rest of the cigarette lying on the floor, and he sat there and it had burned down through his fingers without him noticing. So he was in a very sorry state. You know, it was at that point that I was suggesting to Peter and Andrew that I said, look, we can't go on like this, right? You know, he's got to become Brian Wilson, you know, because the thought of losing the flow of songs was disastrous for us at that point, because he was doing most of the writing. So he said, why doesn't he just write songs and come and record and we'll go and do gigs? But there's no way we can do that anyway.
And it was very difficult after that, because Syd was absolutely the core of everything when Pink Floyd first started its professional career, because he wrote 90% of the songs. I think I wrote 1 song on the first album, maybe 2, but basically, you know, it was in his hand.
And there we were, all young, all very young, and trying to make our way. And by that time, Dave had already joined the band to play guitar, and because Syd didn't play, I'm not saying he couldn't. Well, he couldn't really, because both of us made his solo records with him, helped produce his solo records after that point, and it was pretty kind of disjointed and difficult to get him to do anything.
Is the story true that you were recording, I think it was Shine On You Crazy Diamond, and a bald man walked in with a toothbrush in his mouth and no eyebrows? Am I making this up?
I had no idea who this person was, and this was my closest childhood friend. He'd put on about 100 pounds in weight. He was completely, I just didn't recognize him. I think David eventually said to me, you don't get it, do you? And I went, get what? And I looked over and went, oh my goodness. And I suddenly realized who it was. And we were recording the song that I wrote for Syd at the time in the studio. So it was a strange moment.
The beautiful song Shine On You Crazy Diamond was written as a tribute to Syd Barrett many years later. It's very unusual for a band to acknowledge the thing that's missing within it.
Yeah.
How did that song actually come about? Did you sit down together and talk about writing it, or did...
No, I wrote it.
Yes.
It's very moving to play. You know, it's like he's there again. Like, he was so beautiful, Syd. He was so vibrant and so talented. You know, it's a really good song, and it describes how I experienced his disintegration. And it describes as well the great desire I had then and still have now, and the passion I have to celebrate him and his talent and his humanity, and to express the love that I have for him. I mean, Syd appears obviously on Wish You Were Here a lot, and also in The Wall a lot. So he was, you know, my friendship with him and his illness combined, provide an enormous opportunity for grief. It's sad. It's very sad. I'm still very sad about it, you know.
The rumor goes is that he just took too many drugs, and that he just kind of lost it, and then at one point he just didn't want to play or couldn't function really, and then he kind of eventually just left the band, and Dave Gilmour came in. And
you know, there is schizophrenia is used to describe a loose kind of amalgamation of symptoms, of which many Syd had. He heard voices, and he had trouble keeping a grip on the reality of his situation. And on top of that, he did take, too many hallucinogenics.
I mean, did the Pink Floyd do a lot of drugs at those times, or was that a myth? I mean, I've never read anywhere, I think
Syd did a fair bit of acid, and we all smoked quite a lot of dope at one time, but I almost never did any acid. I think once, twice in my life, and nothing else.
Was it drugs that destroyed Syd Barrett as a member of Pink Floyd? And if it was, how close did drugs come in that era of acid and psychedelia to actually destroying the band?
Well, my personal belief is that drugs, LSD was not solely responsible for Syd's illness. It felt to me at the time that Syd was kind of drifting off the rails, and when you're drifting off the rails, the worst thing you can do is start messing around with hallucinogenics.
Marijuana, to a certain extent, and acid to a large extent, can do nothing but exacerbate that collection of symptoms that we put together and loosely describe as schizophrenia, And so there is no doubt but that those things are very bad for schizophrenics. They worsen the condition and so on and so forth. And there is no doubt that Syd was schizophrenic and that he was taking those drugs at the same time.
It may be because he was mixing with people who were doing acid on a regular basis, I think, in '67. And I'm sure he did too much of it. Was he teetering on the edge of what might be called schizophrenia at the time? I think so, probably.
There is no question but that LSD, and he did take quite a lot of it, I believe. I wasn't living with him at the time.
But I just wonder whether you, David Gilmour and others, were on the same path at the time. Not at all.
Nothing, no, not even. I took LSD once in my life, and it was amazing, but I thought, wow, I don't want to do that again. Not because it was horrific, but just because that's a choice you make. You either go down that path or you don't. But it definitely exacerbated the symptoms that, loosely strung together, you and I might call schizophrenia. He heard voices, he became incommunicative, he turned into a different person. They were black holes in the sky.
I think if you were in the position of being an incipient schizophrenic like he was, any hallucinogenics are a very bad thing. So yeah, it was very sad, and he sort of drifted away from the reality of the rest of our lives.
Whatever happened to Syd Barrett? Do you still speak with him?
No, I haven't spoken to him for a number of years.
All right, Richard, one thing too, and to everybody else listening, Syd has not actually been active in very many circles at all lately, so it'd be very difficult to talk to Syd, just in case you were wondering. And if that sounded like actually our friend Roger was being very polite.
I understand you do a bit of a tribute to Syd Barrett in your live show tonight. What's happening with Syd? When was the last time you saw him? Is he still very much a recluse?
Yeah, he's still very much a recluse. Well, he's a schizophrenic. I mean, you knew that. Everybody knows that. He lives in Cambridge, and he's in and out of the hospital, and I think he still lives with his mum. He doesn't really do a great deal. It's sad, but it's one of the sad facts of life, you know. They haven't been able to do very much for him.
And he lived a very solitary life. And I spoke to his sister Rosemary after that, and saying, does it make any sense, to go and visit? No, don't do that. And she told me, I said, why not? And she said, well, he gets very agitated and upset if he's reminded of what happened before, whatever this is. He doesn't like it.
He doesn't like contact with people from that part of his past. It upsets him, so I stay away from him. And and in a way, I think in a way that's all I can do, because It would not be cool to upset him, but it would upset me as well. You know, here's somebody who'd been a friend with, you've had laughs with, and you've spent your youth with, and you've had all that history with, and to not be, and it's like, hello. It's just, it would be very uncomfortable for me as well.
Would you ever work with him again if things were, I guess, feasible?
Sid is not coming home, I'm afraid. Or not, there doesn't seem to be. He's, the voices he hears are too loud, I think, for him to make much sense to the rest of us.
I was in Harrods, shopping, and I saw Sid.
Did he recognise you?
I don't think he saw me. I saw him, he had his brown paper bag, and he was buying sweets. Because I think he just lived on sweets. He used to live in the Hilton Hotel for a long time. He had sort of suite of rooms and stuff where he would sit and eat. So he spent, far too much of his money doing that, and then he eventually moved from there. That's the last time I saw him.
And he used to paint a little bit and live just on his own in Cambridge until he died when he was 60.
Wow.
He died it was 2006, I think, and you said very notably that at the time that he died, you felt as if you'd done your grieving a good 2 decades before.
Yeah, because he wasn't accessible.
Yeah.
He didn't want to see anybody from his past, ever.
What do you want the world to know about Syd Barrett?
He was a charming, ebullient, talented friend, and I miss him. But I've been missing him since 1968, because he succumbed to some sort of mental illness, which you might call schizophrenia. You can kind of call that combination of symptoms anything you want, but the fact is that if it happens to somebody, it prevents them from communicating with their friends, loved ones, with anybody. They really do develop a wall, and Syd developed a wall, and it was extremely sad. But he was very talented. But the work is there, and people love him, and people love his work, and new people discover the songs that he wrote as the years go by.